Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and this time what we are going to be doing is a little bit of a graphics comparison between Donkey Kong Bananza and Super Mario Odyssey. Now for those who are worried, there will be no spoilers in this video. There's going to be no story stuff, and I'll only be comparing some of the early areas in the game, the areas that Nintendo showed off from the very first trailer of the game. So don't worry, there will be no real spoilers here. Now some of you may be wondering, why are we comparing Donkey Kong Bananza with Super Mario Odyssey? Well, the reason is because many have seen that there are a lot of similarities between these two different games, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that many key members of the Super Mario Odyssey team have also worked on Donkey Kong Bananza. Both of these games have been made by EPD Production Group number 8. And so because of that, I think comparing these two different games and seeing the evolution in tech will be very, very interesting. So that's what we're getting into today. Playing incredible games is great, but being able to play incredible games while living a long, happy, healthy life is even better, which is why prioritizing your fitness and nutrition is very important. Which is also why I'm excited to talk about today's sponsor, Huel, a provider of nutritionally complete food. Huel offers so much more than just a protein drink. All the Huel meals and bars provide 27 essential vitamins and minerals, plus a 100% nutritionally complete balance of protein, essential fats, carbohydrates, and fiber. It's all formulated by leading nutrition experts verified by science. In particular, I would like to speak on the Huel Black Edition formula. It's a nutritionally complete powdered food which is high in protein, fiber, reduced carbohydrates, and it's rich in healthy fats. You're getting healthy ingredients here, and it's going to help you to have a more balanced diet. And if you're someone who likes to work out and stay fit, this is offering a good amount of protein as well. This Black Edition formula has been greatly beneficial for my daily routine, giving me more time in the day, one less meal I need to cook, and I also get the nutrients and protein I need before going to the gym. And it's also highly affordable as well, averaging just $2.65 per meal. I also got to try out the ready-to-drink Black Editions as well: chocolate, vanilla, iced coffee, strawberry, banana, my personal favorite. And to be clear, this is more than just a drink. This is a high-protein, complete meal. Try Huel with 15% off today using my code ANDRES15. The link will be in the description below. So throughout this video, to compare to Donkey Kong Bananza, I am going to be using footage from Mario Odyssey played on Nintendo Switch 2. And there are differences between Mario Odyssey on the Switch 2 versus Switch 1, so I first would like to compare these two versions first so you have a good idea of how much the game has been improved. While Mario Odyssey holds up really well, the Switch 2 enhancements of Mario Odyssey are significant. As you see here, the resolution has been bumped up significantly. It's now at 1440p, and side by side you can see how Mario Odyssey on Switch 1 is very blurry by comparison. You can make out so much more detail in the Switch 2 version of Mario Odyssey. Everything is so much more clear and crisp, and it almost feels like they added new elements to the game because of the resolution, allowing us to see so much more clearly. But it does go beyond a resolution bump here, because they also did add HDR support, high dynamic range, so you may be noticing a difference in color here. And as I continue to look at this footage, I'm even more inspired to play through Mario Odyssey again. And so lately I have been revisiting Super Mario Odyssey on Switch 2 and noticing how well it holds up, but I'm also now playing Donkey Kong Bananza. It's been out for a few days, and I'm noticing some pretty big key differences. The main one, the voxel technology, all of the destruction in this game. Almost everything can be destroyed in Donkey Kong Bananza. This is something that's not possible in most games. There are a few games out there that allow for great levels of destruction like Bananza, but when you also consider that this game is a polished platformer like a Mario Odyssey, and they have all this level of destruction mixed in there as well, the possibilities are enormous. Now, this is me trying to explain things in layman terms here. A voxel, for those who do not know, is essentially a three-dimensional pixel. They can be described as cubes, and when we take a look at games that use voxel technology, it's very apparent that it's made with a whole bunch of cubes, and this type of tech really facilitates destructive environments, which is really great for that type of gameplay. But Nintendo went the extra step to make sure that these voxels are represented in a way where you do not see all these apparent cubes. As we play through Bananza, it's very hard to discern all these cube-like pixels. Nintendo has made tremendous leaps with voxel technology here. They actually used a little bit of it in Super Mario Odyssey when destroying the cheese and going through the snow, and as you can see with this footage here, the detail in the snow is far lesser than the detail we see in the snow in Bananza. And then when looking at the cheese is very cube-like in structure, but in Bananza, it's far more than just cubes you can destroy. It's almost everything. Now, if you've gone this far into the video, let me point out that I do have this goal to reach 60,000 subscribers, so if you find yourself enjoying my content, your subscription would be appreciated. In order to better grasp how impressive this voxel tech is in Bananza though, let me quote Wataru Tanaka, one of the developers of Donkey Kong Bananza, from part 2 of the Ask Developer series on this game. Tanaka: from a programmer's perspective, voxel technology is well suited for creating gameplay centered around destruction. However, it also uses a lot of memory, and we faced this challenge of Switch not having enough to support everything we wanted to do. I'll explain with some simple arithmetic. If you're asked to double the size of a 1x1 pixel, imagine both width and height. You end up with a 2x2 image, which means 4 times as many pixels. But when you do the same with voxels, you've got width and height, but also depth to contend with. So doubling all 3 dimensions gives you a 2x2x2, or 8 times the data. It may sound simple to just double something, but the reality is that memory usage, voxel density, and all kinds of processes end up gobbling up 8 times the resources. It was clear that the memory available on Switch would struggle to handle that load, and we felt that manifesting the huge volume of terrain that we did in this game might have been unachievable on that platform. With the move to Switch 2, we gained not only more memory, but also greater processing capacity. That gave us the freedom to incorporate gameplay ideas we'd previously abandoned because they were too demanding. And so straight from one of the developers of Donkey Kong Bananza, what is being accomplished in this game is impossible for Switch 1. And there's a lot of really fun stuff that we can do with this new gameplay. Yeah, you can destroy through everything, create giant dens underground, or build bridges by attaching different pieces, or just simply using the environment to your advantage as a weapon. I would like to mention something I've noticed about the way this voxel tech works in Bananza. I've noticed that you can actually destroy a lot of terrain and then leave the rest of the terrain suspended in midair. It's an interesting, I guess, quirk of the systems they chose to use for Donkey Kong Bananza. I imagine that if they applied another layer of physics here where once something was suspended in midair it would fall down due to gravity, that would be increasingly more demanding, and perhaps not realistic when you account for everything else that this game is doing. And I wouldn't call this a criticism, it's an observation. If anything, I might argue this adds a little bit more to the whimsy of the world. Like, Donkey Kong Bananza obviously is not possible in real life. We are seeing things that don't make sense from our understanding of the real world, so seeing that we can destroy environments and leave parts of them suspended in midair, I think kind of feeds into that. Now, on the note of the Ask Developer series, there is something else that Nintendo shared during this interview that many people found quite interesting. They showed off a screenshot of how Donkey Kong Bananza might have looked on Switch 1 versus how it looks on Switch 2, and as you see here from these 2 screenshots, there's far more foliage and just overall density to the environment in the Switch 2 version. And so when looking at environments from Bananza and those comparable in Mario Odyssey, this is also very apparent. Like, you look at the lagoon layer and there's just so much going on. There's so many different types of terrain, objects, characters, levels to the environment and the background. And then you look at levels in Mario Odyssey, well, yes, they look good. They're going for a more simplistic direction, and that's fine, and it holds up well, but you can still tell just how much more detail and objects and just density to the environment there is in Bananza in contrast to Mario Odyssey. Now, that isn't to say there aren't elements of Mario Odyssey that hold up quite comparably well to Bananza. There are. If I really wanted to show the biggest difference here, I would have been using just the Switch 1 version of Mario Odyssey for comparison, but I'm mostly using the Switch 2 version. Because Mario Odyssey, with some minor enhancements, is still a very good looking game. Like, when we take a look at some of the water effects in the Cascade Kingdom, we can see the mist rising from the waterfall, we can see these little rainbows, and it looks fantastic. And then as you approach the waterfall, you can see little droplets hitting the screen. It's kind of a fourth wall breaking little effect they're putting there, but it's still nice to see. And then, of course, once Mario is close to that mist, you see that he gets wet as well. And then when you see Mario jump into the water, he actually has different animations depending on where he's at in the water. So if he's on the surface swimming around, you see him repeatedly opening his mouth, gasping for air. But if he's underwater, you see he's actually holding his breath and his cheeks puff up. But then you look at Donkey Kong Bonanza, and DK just has one facial expression for when he's in the water. His cheeks puff up. Now, DK doesn't dive deep underwater for extended periods of time, so that may be one reason why he just has one sole expression here. But when we look at this expression, when we look at his face close up, and then we also compare it to Mario's and both their cheeks are puffed up, you can see how the detail in DK's character model is more advanced than Mario's. The cheeks of Mario look a little bit more blocky than DK's. But I will say, when just playing around with the water and seeing the nice cool little ripple effects in Mario Odyssey, still looks great. Seems to look a little bit different depending on the area, if it's fresh water or salt water. Though regardless, it looks nice, and you can see all those little cool ripple effects in the water. You can still do this in Donkey Kong Bonanza, but it seems to be a little bit more subtle. However, something else interesting I've noticed is that in Mario Odyssey, there are some areas where you can see the reflection of the water on the walls of the environment. And if you dive underwater, you can see even more reflections of the water. In Bonanza, though, they use this water reflection trick a little bit more interestingly, I would say. So we can see that in the lagoon layer, because this entire world is technically under the ocean, right? And if you look at the sky, you can see the ocean above you. There's actually like a subtle sort of water reflectiveness upon all the terrain you explore. You can kind of see it waving around, which is really cool. But then if we go into a cave, we can see the water reflections more pronounced all throughout the walls. And what's neat about this is that if we destroy the terrain, you can still see those water reflections applying to the destroyed terrain. It doesn't disappear. Another observation I like to go back to here is when we see Mario get out of the water, we can see him dripping wet for a little bit. It takes some time for him to dry up. But for DK, when he gets out of the water, we actually see him do a little bit of a shake, kind of like a dog, and then he's dry. It's a cool effect. And another cool thing I'll point out, when DK's being hit by water, you can see the splashing upon his body. With Mario, you don't really see it that much. And also notice when DK is getting splashed around, you will see little droplets hitting the screen like we saw in Mario Odyssey in the Cascade Kingdom. So they didn't get rid of that effect, and this time it looks a little bit more realistic. Now, some other things that I would say are fairly obvious. The textures in Donkey Kong Bonanza are more advanced and sophisticated. Like, look at this metal here. You don't really see this level of detail throughout Mario. There's definitely a greater level that's been achieved in Bonanza. And then when looking at the overall scope of the game, it is also apparent just how much grander it is in Donkey Kong Bonanza. Like, look how I'm climbing up this chute and I can just examine this massive environment here in the background. And you can explore a lot of this area, right? In Mario Odyssey, say, for example, we look at something similar like the very top of New Donk City, and yeah, there's certainly scale there, but you can see the amount of explorable area is dwarfed in contrast to what we see in Bonanza. And let's also keep in mind, for every massive area in Bonanza, each one tends to have several levels, right? So the levels in Bonanza are far larger, and then we also account for the fact that there's this destruction, so there's actually many different degrees of elevation throughout all of the terrain and then the different layers. There's just so much more to explore in terms of literal surface area in Donkey Kong. And there are some large areas in Mario Odyssey, even bigger than New Donk City, like the Sand Kingdom. But notice how when we're exploring the Sand Kingdom, it's mostly just sand, and you run along. But in Donkey Kong, there's a lot of different things you can do throughout the environment, even when it's just a vast expanse that at first glance may look very similar, but as you begin to destroy, you'll find all these different objects and items, so much debris and particles flying in your face. It can make Mario Odyssey, at times, feel quite barren. And so it should come as no surprise that Donkey Kong Bonanza has a lot more going on, a lot more sophistication to its visuals than Super Mario Odyssey. It's a game that has come out many years later for more powerful hardware. And in my early hours of the game, I would say actually performance holds up pretty well. I know there have been some criticisms in that department for the game, but really it hasn't impacted my experience in any negative way. And so the game visually and also from a technical perspective, when we account for all the voxel tech and the destruction, is impressive. But then when going back to Mario Odyssey, when we account for the Switch 2 update, how it does look better now, it still holds up really well. It's still a pretty game, and it's fun to go back to. So really, I just mean to praise both games here. Both are awesome, and I'm very curious what we're going to see of the next 3D Mario when Nintendo does decide to show that off. But what do you all think? What do you make of the differences between Donkey Kong Bonanza and Super Mario Odyssey? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart, thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.